investigating COVID. They seem to indicate that Dr. Fauci worked hard to suppress information supporting the COVID lab leak theory. The New York Post, Miranda Devine, writes that Fauci's emails show he had commissioned and had final approval on a scientific paper in February of 2020 to disprove that the virus leaked from the lab, the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China. 2 months later, Fauci joined a White House press briefing alongside President Trump, citing his paper as evidence that the lab leak theory was implausible. He also denied knowing who the authors of the report were. And that study, titled, quote, "The Proximal Origin of SARS-CoV-2," was in fact sent to Fauci for editing and again for final approval before it was published in Nature Medicine on February 17th of 2020. A bipartisan group of lawmakers in the House Intelligence Committee says the Chinese government's refusal to cooperate in the early days of the investigation and still up until this point means that we may never get enough information to fully determine the origins of COVID-19. Chairman Mike Turner appearing on NBC's Meet the Press yesterday talking about that lack of evidence.
All this is being assessed by looking at other aspects of the release.
Now, the comments contrast recent reports by the Department of Energy and the FBI director's Christopher Wray, who says it's most likely that the virus came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And joining us now for more on this is Trish Regan, host of the Trish Regan Show. Great to see you as always, Trish.
Hey, good to see you too, John.
All right, let's play that clip of Dr. Fauci and what he said about the origins of COVID back in April of 2020. This is just 8 weeks after commissioning that scientific paper.
There was a study recently that we can make available to you where a group of highly qualified evolutionary virologists looked at the sequences there and the sequences in bats as they evolve. And the mutations that it took to get to the point where it is now is totally consistent with a jump of a species from an animal to a human. So, I mean, the paper will be available. I don't have the authors right now, but we can make that available too.
Now, Trish, it seems like the accusations now are moving from, well, Fauci knew about this, to Fauci may have tried to cover this up.
Well, I mean, that's the question everybody wants answered. Because if you listen to that clip, he makes no indication whatsoever, John, that he had anything to do with the writing of the paper. It's amazing to me because, you know, look, I'm just old-fashioned. I actually just want the truth. In this particular case, on February 1st of 2020, according to the investigation by the subcommittee in the House of Representatives, well, there was a phone call with Fauci and a series of other scientists in which they were told, look, it's possible that this came from the Wuhan lab. It's possible it was genetically re-engineered. And then just a few days later, what do you know? 3 of the scientists that were on the call suddenly whip up this paper. And according to this investigation by the House, Fauci had the ability to go through, read the draft, make edits. And we don't know this. Meanwhile, the guy who officially wrote it, Dr. Christian Andersen, he sends it to the Nature journal, Nature Medicine, and in the cover letter says that this was prompted by Fauci. So in other words, publish it or else. And then the editors at the Nature journal don't bother to tell any of us that anybody had a hand in this. It really kind of feels a bit suspicious. And so I think now, yes, everybody's asking the question. And don't forget, EcoHealth had all that money, right, that was from taxpayers that somehow wound up at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And there's a big question right now as to whether or not, and we don't know the answer to this yet, whether or not there was an effort to cover that up. What I would just say is I'm looking at all of this saying, wait a second, we were trying to talk about this, right?
Right.
3 years ago, and they shut it down. Fauci had a hand in shutting it down, and now we learn that the FBI says, yes, most likely scenario came from the Wuhan lab. We learn that the U.S. Energy Department says most likely scenario came from the Wuhan lab. We need to be able to get to the bottom of this. We need the truth.
And the question is, will we ever be able to get to the bottom of this based on what we know about China and their refusal to cooperate? And this is the question we asked Gordon Chang in the last hour, Trish, is, you know, if there's a crime that's been committed and someone's not cooperating, usually they're held to account for that part of it. Will we ever be held to account, or China, will they ever be held to account? And we need some support from the global community to do this. There seems to be a lack of will on that. Also wanted to ask you, too, about President Biden's trip down to Alabama. You know, kudos to going down there, to supporting the civil rights movement, of course. But then we have the president and his foe, his longtime foe, the steps of Air Force One, Trish. Do we need to install one of those step lifts for Joe Biden on Air Force One?
I know what you're talking about.
I don't want to see the president of the United States ever trip and fall. And now it's 3 times this has happened. We've got to prevent it.
I know.
We've got to do something.
I know. Oh my gosh, I hate that. You know what? Like I hate seeing that. I'm with you. I'm absolutely with you. I don't think we'd like to see him going up in the rider thing though either. The lift. Yeah. I think. Look, it proves again. Age, I know they say it's just a number, but no, not entirely. And, your body has more physical challenges. Your mind has more physical challenges as you get up there into the stratosphere that he is in. He went to Alabama. He still, by the way, hasn't gone to East Palestine, Ohio. I don't know what he's got against Ohio at this point. There are things that he should be doing. Unfortunately, this is once again, I guess, another example of, unfortunately, his health maybe not being what it once was, right? Yeah. That's just the reality.
That is the reality. This is one of the things you have to do as president, is be able to climb the stairs of Air Force One without falling down. I don't want to see Joe Biden fall down. I don't want to see any U.S. president fall down on the job, literally or figuratively. And Trish,
I can tell you that I don't even like watching the video, and I know that it's played. We're in the television business, but it's hard to see. Like you just don't want to see. And I say this with no partisan bias. I always want my president.
I'm with you.
To be strong and to look strong.
Yeah, especially at times like these. And you got Joe Biden saying that the idea that a person over the age of 75 who wants to run for president should have to take some sort of mental acuity test is ridiculous. I mean, I don't think it's ridiculous.
Look, if you want to get insurance, right? Long-term care insurance, you better bet they're going to give you one of those tests. Doesn't seem like a lot to ask. Look, This is the most important job. And I think the frustration many Americans feel right now, John, is that you get a sense that it's kind of on autopilot. Mm-hmm. And we don't want that, right? We're electing a leader. We're electing somebody to run the country. We want the CEO that's calling all the shots, if you would. And if someone is not fully able to do that, well, as a shareholder, you'd force them out of the company. As an American citizen, as a voter, we want to make sure that the person that we elect is actually making the decisions and running the whole shebang. And I think that's what people are worried about.
There are a lot of people worried about exactly that. Trish Regan, always great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.